Hi, thanks for joining us for the message from Palmyra Grace this week. We're praying that you'll be encouraged to live out the truths you hear from God's Word in your families and communities.
I'm super excited to be with you this morning. I'm a little less nervous right now than I was for the first service, but I'm still going to take some time to pray before I get started and ask God to be at work as I get going. So let's pray. God, I thank you so much for this opportunity today. God, I pray that we would be as excited as those little kids are to learn about you. That God, when we leave this place today, it would show that we have encountered you. God, help us to see you not just today, but throughout the week. Help us to spend time with you. God, I pray as you've given me some words to say today, God, that they would be your words, that I'd get out of the way, and that you would be brought glory through all that is said and done. And I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. So I believe it was my junior year of college, maybe my sophomore year of college. I'm not 100% on the details. But I made one of the not quite dumbest mistakes I've ever made in life, but at that time it was kind of dumb. I was dating this girl, and she invited me to go to a concert with a friend and her boyfriend. And, because I kind of liked this girl, I was getting to know her, I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go with. So it was a country concert. Anybody who knows me just a little bit knows I don't like country at all, okay? But there was this one song, we were going to see Brad Paisley, and there was this one song that I really liked. I think Lindsay and I actually danced to it at her wedding. She's not here, so I'm good. Okay, I still don't remember the name of it. But we get there, and what I didn't know about a concert was that there's multiple people that go before the guy I actually knew. So by the end of the first guy's opener, I was done. I was like, I don't want anything to do with country music anymore. And then the second guy came on stage, and that still wasn't Brad Paisley. Finally, we get there, and I'm like, yes, I'm finally going to get to hear a song I know, and I'm going to enjoy it. He never sang it. Never sang the one song I know. I met with somebody this week to talk about it, and they said it wasn't the song where he says, I want to check you for ticks, right? No, it wasn't that song. He sang that one, but it was at Penn State, and he mentioned something about a Nittany Lion tattoo. That's just a joke. But what I realized in that moment is that as I got to know somebody, and as I began to care about somebody, and they loved me and I loved them, that my life choices were changing. I would have never gone to a country concert. Never. But there was this cute girl, and I was kind of getting to know her and liked her a little bit, so why not? Why not step out and do something just a little bit different? I bet most of you can probably relate to that. At some point, all of you that are married in here, you started dating someone, right? And your guy friends or your girlfriends had little quips they would say to remind you that they were more important than whoever you were dating. I don't think I can repeat them in church, but you know what I'm talking about. Maybe you started to spend your money differently. You started to say, you know what, maybe I don't want to just spend this on me. I want to spend it on this other person that I care about. Maybe you just started saving money for one of these one day, right? And you wouldn't have necessarily done that before, except as you engaged in a relationship with a person, your life, your wants, and your desires began to change. Maybe you did something as simple as change your voice or your accent. Maybe you learned to say Lebanon and Lancaster counties the right way. A couple of you get that. And I'm sure that you've done other things that people would consider kind of dumb. I know multiple times where I would jump into life with a girlfriend where other people would be like, Phil, that's just stupid. What are you doing? But I started to do it because I cared. And that person loved me back. What I noticed was I began to change. Sometimes I made a choice, and sometimes I subconsciously just did things a little bit different. Because I knew in the end what would make my girlfriend at the time happy. Maybe for some of you, you're that person. Maybe you're the person that somebody has met in their life, and they started to change you. You started to change how you were because of them. You started to look at life a little bit differently and start to think differently and do things because of this person, or they started doing that because of you. You see, we all reflect something. We all reflect people around us. We reflect those closest to us. Hopefully we're reflecting Jesus. But whether we know it or not, we're all either being influenced or we are influencing other people. So here at Palmyra Grace, we say that we exist to help you pursue a life with God, together and on mission. We built this mission statement by looking at the life of Jesus. Jesus came down to this earth. Pastor Dan used to call him God in a bod. It was literally God, what God would be as a human being, Jesus himself. We got to see Jesus have a relationship with his Father, where he was constantly going back to his Father before every big choice in ministry. Jesus would take a step away from the people around him, go to his Father, and then God would do great things through him. But he also maintained for 3 years, we got to see, 3 to 3.5 years, we got to see him maintain a relationship with these 12 guys that we today call disciples. There were 12 people who had already started to kind of pay attention to what Jesus was doing in his ministry, and Jesus set them apart to say, hey, follow me. Watch what I do. Become more like me so you can reflect me to the world when I'm gone. Jesus also had a mission. And it's a little bit different than our mission for the churches today. Jesus' mission, right after John 3:16, we all know John 3:16, right? God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever would believe in him would not die but have eternal life. And then John 3:17 says, for God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. And Jesus had this mission. He went through his entire life with the goal in the end to save the world, no matter what the cost was. We find him the night before he dies in a garden, sweating drops of blood. I can't even imagine what that would be like. But sweating drops of blood because he recognizes that what he's about to go through is about the cruelest thing you can do to a human body. And he says, Father, if it's your will, then I will drink from this cup. I will do the mission you've set before me, no matter the cost. Today, just like Jesus had a mission, he gave us a mission. We call it the Great Commission. He said, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe everything I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age. I love Nick's song because one of the things it constantly reminds us of is actually the verse just before this. That because of what Jesus did, and because all authority was given unto him, we are able to go and do these things. Just like Jesus kneeling in the garden knew that he could go through with what the plan that God had set before him. We should know that we can go through with the plan God has set for us. I'm calling today Reflect. We've been going through this as a student ministry. And what I've learned as I've been going through it as students is that I think we all need it. That it's more than just something for young people. It's something for each and every one of us. So, excuse me for a minute. I have to grab a prop. But I have a couple definitions of reflect for us to go through. So the first definition is to embody or represent something or someone in a faithful or appropriate way. I've already got students over here giggling because they know what happened when I did this. They're giggling over here too. Funny enough, they're sitting in the same area as they were when I did this for them. We went on a retreat and talked about reflect, and we came back and I was like, you know what, reflect, you got to have a mirror. So I had a mirror sitting around and I brought it in and I set it up in front of the students. And I was talking about reflect and how do we reflect Jesus? And just like they were giggling when we started here, there were some students over here giggling and there were some students giggling over here. And I was like, what are you guys laughing at? One of them was brave enough to go, you should see him. And he's like, yeah, you should see yourself. This mirror is not very accurate. I don't know if you guys can see that. But it doesn't do a great job of reflecting. So one of the very important parts of reflect is that it has to embody or represent something or someone in a faithful or appropriate way. Totally unlike this mirror. I'm going to set it up this way so y'all can't see each other. And I don't have gigglers everywhere. Sorry, Patty. Another definition is to make manifest or apparent. Manifest implies that it's easy to see. It's easy to see. We shouldn't have to go through life. People shouldn't have to go through life when we say, hey, we follow this guy named Jesus. People shouldn't have to look hard. It should be relatively apparent to them that grace and love that Jesus gave to us is also being reflected to the world around us. The last time I was up here, I shared God's word from John 15. Verses 4 and 5, and I want to revisit them today. If you've got a Bible with you, go ahead and take it out. If you need a Bible, there's a couple back there by the door. You can grab one and then take it with you today. You're going to hear as I go through this sermon that if you don't have one, I really want you to have one. So grab one when you head out. But it says in John 15, verses 4 and 5, it says, remain in me. This is Jesus speaking, by the way. It says, remain in me, and I will remain in you. For a branch cannot produce fruit if it is severed from the vine, and you cannot be fruitful unless you remain in me. Yes, I am the vine, and you are the branches. Those who remain in me and I in them will produce much fruit, for apart from me, you can do nothing. What I want to remind us of just very briefly is this part where if we're not spending time with God, good luck producing fruit. You will for a time, and it'll feel good in the little bit you get to, but at some point, you are going to get tired of it. And you're going to start doing it just for yourself. But Jesus says, and in this section of Scripture, his command isn't just go and produce fruit. His command is to remain with me. Stay with me. I'm going to stay with you if you do that, and I'm going to make fruit in your life. If you're spending time with me, people will see that you're spending time with me. Your life will change. But it raised a question for me. How do we remain in him? And you know what the only answer I have is? It's a Sunday school answer. Do we know what Sunday school answers are? They're those answers. They're those answers that we say when we want the Sunday school teacher to leave us alone, that we know the right answer. But in the secret, in the back, we're not willing to actually do what our answer is. So our answer is often for this question, right? Read your Bibles. I can answer that real easy. I don't always do it. Spend time praying. Are we doing that, or is that just our answer because we know the answer? That's a Sunday school answer. Oftentimes we work really hard to change our own lives, but we forget to step back in and be changed by the one who's given and lived the life that we're called to live. I started to tell you the story about this cute girl that I met in college and how my life started to kind of change as I got to know her a little bit more. Oftentimes, I could tell by the words she would say if the things I was doing were within her will. Just stay with me a little bit. This is going to sound really, really personal. Or I could tell by the expression on her face if what I was doing is what she would appreciate. Sometimes I could tell by the just absolute silence that I had totally messed up. Okay? Thank God God doesn't do that to us. But through those experiences, I began to learn the different ways that my life could accurately reflect the things that made my wife today happy. That earthly relationship definitely isn't the best picture of God, right? Because Lindsay will admit to you that some things changed in her life too because of me. My life definitely changed some because of hers, but God doesn't change. God doesn't change, yet still I find myself in my life as I get to know him better. As I spend time in his word, I begin to find my life changing and becoming ever so differently. Sometimes I make a choice on my own, but more often than not, what I find is subconsciously as I work through life with God, when something arises in life, I start thinking, what would God do? What would God have me do here? And because I know what his word is, it becomes so much easier. I can just take that step forward. And I know that it's what God wants for me. Could I also say, though, that I could go the other way? That I could absolutely not care about the silent treatment. I could absolutely not care when I was told, hey, Phil, that's not exactly how this relationship's gonna work. I could not care at all. I could do this thing where I hear everything my wife is saying, repeat it back to her, but still not get up and go take the trash out. I could take everything in or not take it in, just take in enough just to be able to sound like I heard what she said, but not actually do what's called of me. You see, there's lots of people in this room who you don't know, right? Don't know really well. Maybe know their names, maybe know a couple of their kids. But I don't think you could accurately reflect who they are the way I can with my wife. Because we don't know them. And you cannot reflect someone you don't know. And now I'm switching over to Jesus. Look at me. You cannot reflect someone you don't know. If we're to be in a world where we're to be showing the world who Jesus is, if we don't know him, we can't actually look like him. You cannot and will not. You'll be like this mirror and have students giggling in either corner because when they look at each other, it's not right. Try to keep that out of your eyes. Romans 8:29 says that God's desire is that we be conformed to the image of his Son. We know this, and we know that being called a Christian means to be one whose life looks like Christ. But I'm afraid that we do not put the time into actually knowing who Jesus was, who Jesus is, and who God has told us he's going to be. We get distracted by our jobs, even me as a pastor. I get distracted by my job on a weekly basis from actually spending time with God. I'll pick up my Bible and make sure I'm studying it to bring a message like this today. But I'm studying it not to know Jesus necessarily, but to be able to speak about it. And I get distracted by my own job for that. I want you to think about this with me, because I'm going to say something really crazy here in a moment. And this will make it make more sense. You're watching TV, and this commercial comes on. And there's this sad, pitiful-looking dog out on the street. This sad, sappy music trying to make you bawl your eyes out. And you feel so bad for that dog. But you don't do anything about it. Passion without action is just emotion and it's useless. If you sat there on that couch and you cried about that poor dog, but you didn't do anything about it, you just had an emotional response. You weren't passionate about it. If you were passionate about it, you would have gone and done something about it. Jesus actually says this. He doesn't say it quite like that, but Jesus says something very similar to this. He says that this people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. They worship me in vain, teaching his doctrines, human commands. To be honest with you, today our churches are full of hypocrites. We're full of people who come in on a Sunday morning and they want to praise Jesus and worship him and get this emotional high and feel good about Jesus. And then we walk back out of here. I'm going to say we because I do it too sometimes. We walk back out of here and we totally forget who Jesus is and we start to show the world somebody totally different. That's awful. Jesus gave us the commission, the Great Commission, to go and make disciples of all the nations. And if we don't even know who he is, then there is no way on this earth we can reflect him and make disciples of all the nations. I still didn't answer that question, though. How do we remain in him? I got on a little soapbox there and kept going. But how do we remain in him? Back to that Sunday school answer, right? We have to dig into God's word. We have to pray. We have to, I'm going to cover this a little bit. We have to be in a community with each other where we all are fighting for the same common goal. David, a man after God's own heart, wrote these words in Psalm 19. And one of the things I want to remind us about David, I was in part of a staff meeting this week. And we were all asked to share what are some things that God has been showing you as you've been in his word. And one of our staff members got up and said, you know, there's this guy named David who we all think is just great. Second king of Israel, called a man after God's own heart. David did some pretty awful stuff. David cheated on his wife. David had a man killed. David ran from Saul when God told him, you're the next king. Even though we mess up, God can still use us. And he says this, David says this about God's words. Turn your Bibles, if you would, to Psalm 19. We're going to start in verse 7. And it says, the instruction of the Lord is perfect, renewing one's life. The testimony of the Lord is trustworthy, making the inexperienced wise. The precepts of the Lord are right, making the heart glad. The command of the Lord is radiant, making the eyes light up. The fear of the Lord is pure, enduring forever. The ordinances of the Lord are reliable and altogether righteous. They are more desirable than gold, than an abundance of pure gold, and sweeter than honey, dripping from a honeycomb. In addition, your servant is warned by them, and in keeping them there is an abundant reward. Who perceives his unintentional sins? Cleanse me from my hidden faults. Moreover, keep your servant from willful sins. Do not let them rule me. Then I will be blameless and cleansed from blatant rebellion. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable to you, Lord, my rock and my redeemer. David, a man after God's own heart. Somebody who sought after God yet still made mistakes. Sounds like you and me, right? Said this about the truth he found in God's word. And I attempted to do this in the first service and I didn't do so well about it. When I open my Bible, I'm in Psalm 19 right now. David had this part of God's word. We have all this extra stuff right now. But this is what David said about God's word that he had at that time. He said that the instruction of the Lord is perfect, renewing one's life. God's word, if we get into it, can literally change our lives. We just see it sometimes as this other book, this good book that we follow and read sometimes. Or maybe we just open it in church. Maybe you've got 5 of these at home gathering dust. David said it can literally change your life, but you got to open up and read it. He said the testimony of the Lord is trustworthy, making the inexperienced wise. Can I tell you how much I love this part? I'm a pastor that has never been to Bible college. I'm like trying to work through seminary right now, just trying. But God's word right here says that it can make the inexperienced wise. And I know that in this room we've got some people who have lots of experience and have lots of wisdom. But I'm telling you that if you feel inexperienced, dive into God's word and he will make you wiser from that. The precepts of the Lord are right, making the heart glad. And the command of the Lord is radiant, making the eyes light up. I didn't do this on purpose. When the kids ran out, I said they look so happy. And then I sat here on the stage kind of awkwardly with a frown on my face. But Pastor Michael has said to us a couple times, if you know you love Jesus, and you believe you love Jesus, why don't you tell your face? Are we in God's word? Because if we're in God's word right there, it says it will make the heart glad. God will bring us joy, and we can go about life with a smile on our face because we know Jesus, and we know that we cannot be defeated here on this earth. But so often I'm afraid that Bible is just gathering dust. That we've got, I'll show you. Who knows how many other apps on there, right? That we can't take time to click the one that says Bible and spend time with God himself. David goes on and he says that in addition to all those things, your servant is warned by them. Your servant is warned by them. Lots of times I go through life and, I don't always know what the right choice is. But right there I'm told that if I'm in God's word, that God will make sure to warn me, that he will show me the things of this world that are outside of what he wants. And he also says in keeping them, there is an abundant reward. Folks, as we go through life, sometimes life doesn't feel great. It doesn't feel like there's great reward in following Jesus. But oftentimes I would challenge us that maybe we're not spending time with God, and maybe we don't actually know what God wants. And maybe some of those things that are happening in our life are God slowly trying to say, hey, come back to me. Come back to me, rather than just trying to do it all on your own. David said, who perceives his unintentional sins? And I can kind of resonate with David on this one. I was talking with somebody just the other day about how there have probably been sins in my life. I'm 34 years old now. But there have probably been sins in my life that have been sins the entire 34 years. Thank God that he's willing to just continually move us closer to him, because there's times right now he's still just saying, hey, Phil, how about this one? Or how about this sin over here that you keep doing? His word will show me where I am inside and outside of God's will, and will reveal to me those unintentional sins that I'm just doing, and maybe I'm making other people mad. I'm definitely not doing honor to God himself, but he'll show us those. His word shows us those. So how do we abide in him? This whole thing, it's a story about me, about a guy named Jesus that gave his entire life for me. It's a story about a God who created me, who created you, to know him and to be with him. And then we went and messed it up. But it's all in here. If only we'd take the time to look at it. We have a mission statement I covered a little bit earlier, that we do life with God together on mission here at Palmyra Grace. One of the things that we want to make sure that we're doing in the Life with God section is that when you come here to church on a Sunday morning, you get to see God. Whether it's praising and worshiping him, whether it's through the sermon, we are intentionally trying to make sure that you get a glimpse of God every Sunday. Folks, that's like 40 minutes to an hour. And if that's all the Jesus you're getting in your life for a week, I'm afraid that it's going to be a pretty inaccurate representation of who Jesus is. We all need to be taking steps to spend time with God. The more I've gotten to work with teenagers, the more I've realized how much our relationship with God can be somewhat like a relationship here on earth. We talk to people, they talk back to us. We read letters from people. We write letters to people. Why do we not do this with Jesus? Why do we not do that with God? To take the time out of our day, just like we do for anyone else in our lives, to spend time with them. Why do we find it so hard? Let me tell you, I know why we find it so hard. There's this guy named Satan out there, and he wants you. He wants you. There was a pastor up here that stood up with 2 fingers in the nostril and pulling a bunch of people in a pool. Do you remember that? Satan wants to take people with you. And maybe you already know Jesus. You're not going in that pool with Satan. But can I tell you that Satan can use you to convince other people to get in the pool with him? And Satan can use an inaccurate reflection of who Jesus is to take other people into the pool with him? And folks, God knew we wouldn't get it perfect. He knew we couldn't be an accurate reflection of who he is. That's why Jesus came. That's why he sent his son. It was because he knew that I couldn't live up to his standard. He knew that you couldn't live up to his standard. So he paid the price. His son paid the ultimate price so that you and I could be there. And then on top of that, his son says, hey, spend time with me and I'll show you how to live life. I will show you what it looks like to reflect me if you spend time with me. Because again, we cannot reflect someone we don't know. We also say that we do life together. Because life on my own is kind of hard. I could spend a bunch of time in God's Word. Sometimes I look at it and I'm not exactly sure what it means. Maybe some of you fall into that with me. But we say that we also do life together. Because when we do life together, we're inviting other people into our lives to help us show or to help us see who God is and how God's Word applies to us in our daily walks. I'm in seminary right now. And one of the greatest things that seminary has required me to do is not study a book. Although that's probably number 2, studying God's book. But one of the greatest things that he has done for me in my walk with him through seminary is required me to have 2 people that mentor me. One mentors me when it comes to what's it look like to run a church. And one mentors me in my spiritual walk with Jesus. I get to meet with him every week. And I can bring the trials and struggles of my life, and we can sit down and say, well, what do you think God thinks about this? Can I say that I've probably changed more because of that? Through checking into God's Word and how it applies to my life on a weekly basis than I have through all of seminary learning itself? The Bible has this to say. For God did not appoint us to wrath, but to obtain salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ, who died for us, so that whether we are awake or asleep, we may live together with him. And then it says, therefore. And the part about therefore is we're going to see something we should do. But the part before is why. The part before is Jesus gave his life for us. Therefore, because of that, encourage one another and build each other up as you are already doing. One thing I see us as a church do really well, and I got to talk to a couple people who are here for their first time this morning, who got to say how welcoming and inviting this church is. But folks, we've got to move sometimes between welcoming and inviting to let's actually look at what God says about our lives. Let's start to dig in and see how God wants us to grow together, that we can build each other up. I want to encourage us to continue that as a church and take it to the next level. Titus says this, that the old women should teach the younger women how to be better mothers, how to be better wives. I would say that, guys, we can apply that to ourselves too. We should be trying to teach younger men what it looks like to be a better father and a better husband in light of what we know about Jesus. That we could accurately reflect to the next generation who Jesus is and what he's done for us. You see, some of us in the room, or maybe some of you in the room, are mature followers of Jesus. You've known Jesus for a really long time, and he's seen you through some really, really hard times. Yet in the end, you always come back to knowing that God loves you and that he's looking out for you. And that his plan is the best plan for you, and all he's asking you to do is step into that. Could I challenge those of you who feel like that today? Take someone with you. Don't do it alone. You're not doing a ton of good if you're just like sitting there praising God in your bedroom each night saying, God, thank you for getting me through all of this. You're amazing. You're wonderful. Show somebody else who's going through some of the same things you did. God made you specific, and you've gone through specific things in your life for a reason. There are other people going through the same things. Don't do it alone. Take someone with you. Maybe you don't think you're so mature in your walk. In seminary, I'm learning more and more how immature I am in my walk with Jesus. But what I have learned is that there's probably somebody less mature than me. That somebody else needs to know Jesus the way I know Jesus. And that I can rely on these two guys in my life to constantly be pushing me to be closer like Jesus. I should be doing the exact same thing for someone else. Maybe you think that's scary. Maybe you think it'd be scary to try to teach somebody else about Jesus. But could I tell you that I think probably all of you in this room already do that with something other than Jesus? That in your hobbies and the things you do in life, you're probably already looking to somebody else to figure out, how do I do what I do better? You're probably checking out YouTube or Google to figure out, hey, how do I shoot a bow and arrow better? Okay, that's one of my hobbies. How do I do that better? What do I have to buy? What do I have to get to be better at what I do? And then the natural progression is, as you get better, you know what? You find somebody who's just getting started. And you teach them how to shoot a bow and arrow. I don't know what your hobbies are, but I'm sure you have hobbies that's what you do. Maybe it's scrapbooking. Maybe it's a sport. What about the Jesus thing? Are we taking what we know about Jesus and sharing it with other people? Why do we treat it so differently than any other thing we do in life when it's the greatest news ever? That Jesus came and gave his life for you and for me. It's more important than any hobby we can do. And I have to ask, what would the world look like today in the places we work, the places we go to school, even in our own homes. What would the world look like today? What could God make the world look like today through us? If we were willing to truly spend time with the Savior of our lives. If we were willing to open up his word that David said can change your life. That David said can make you wiser. That David said can show you the places you're sinning and you're not reflecting God accurately. What would the world look like if we committed as a church to open God's word not just on a Sunday morning, but on every day of our lives? What if we prayed with him and talked with him every day and said, God, help me to see and to understand your word? What if we came together as individuals and talked about God's word and what it has to do with our life? Because it has a meaning today to us, just like it did to the people it was written to. What would that look like? Because I can imagine that here in Palmyra, God is ready and waiting to move. God has chosen to use us as his example here on earth. But I'm afraid that we don't know him well enough to reflect who he's called us to be and who he is. I'm going to invite the worship team up. And while they're coming up, I wanted to let you know if you're here today and maybe you're not quite sure what it looks like to reflect Jesus. Maybe you're not ready or you're scared to step into what God has called you into. We're going to have some people up here that want to pray with you and they want to talk with you. Because they, just like me, want to see you move from a place where you're not just emotional about God. It's not just something you come to on a Sunday morning, you get all hyped up about good music and a good sermon. But that your life when you go home is now about you and God. And I dare say that God will literally change our world if we committed to diving in with him. Is God calling you today just to read his word more? If it is, do it. You won't regret it. Is God calling you today to find someone you know in your life who knows a little bit more about Jesus than you do? Reach out to them. Reach out to them this week. Say, hey, I want to grow closer to Jesus. I want to know him more. I want to know how I can reflect and look like Jesus. Maybe you're here today and God's been talking to you. He's saying, hey, you need to be that person. When that person asks you, hey, I want to know Jesus the way you know Jesus, can you just say yes for me? You won't regret that either. Take one of those steps today. And as a church, let's see what God can do here in Palmyra.
Thanks again for joining us this week. We hope it will help you as you live out your life with God, together, and on mission. We'd love to connect with you. Feel free to reach out through our social media pages, website, or in person on Sunday mornings at 9 or 10:45 a.m.